Well, good morning and or good afternoon, as the case might be. We are thrilled to have you join us or rejoin us, again, as the case might be. My name is Dalibor Petrovic. I am a partner at Deloitte, and I have had the pleasure of hosting this series of interviews entitled Conversations with Tech Leaders Shaping the Future of Canada for the last now coming year and a half. And we've had some really interesting speakers and really interesting organizations. But today it's going to be a special one because it's very rare for me to speak with someone who leads a technology portfolio for an uranium producing company. So before we start, I'm just going to allow maybe a minute or so for those who will be joining us to click on the link and join the session. I'm just going to thank the CIO Strategy Council for co-hosting and co-promoting this series alongside with Deloitte. Thank you very much for that and for your continuous support. And I'm going to also remind the audience that we are going to reserve some time at the end of this conversation for your questions. So please, using the Q&A feature of the Zoom platform, please feel free to submit your questions and we will do our best to address them. This is a 45-minute long session. So we will spend the first half an hour or so in conversation with Mark and then look to answer any questions you may have. So as I mentioned, it's a thrill and delight to welcome Mark Leach to this episode of Conversations with Tech Leaders Shaping the Future of Canada. Mark is the Vice President and the CIO of Cameco Corporation. And for those of you who might not know, Cameco Corporation is actually the world's largest publicly traded uranium company. And they have manufacturing facilities both in Canada and abroad and supply a material percentage of global uranium supply. It's pretty interesting. And they're actually based right here in Canada. They're based out of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. So without any further ado, Mark, thank you very much again for your time. I typically start by asking our guests to give us a little bit of a proper story, how you navigated both your life and your career to now be the CIO of Cameco. So thank you, and over to you.
Thank you, Dalibor, and good morning or good afternoon to everybody out there, depending on, I guess, where you are in Canada. Very excited to be here today. I hope that I have something that inspires some other people, or and to all the folk who know me out there. Good to see you. It'd be great to stay in contact with you going forward. Yeah, my career started. I'm going to date myself. Back in the PC age, when PCs were first coming out, the internet had just been invented, so that was interesting. But I never started out my life wanting to be in IT. I think the notion and concept of working in IT was still very much reserved for systems engineers, electrical engineers, that kind of thing. So yeah, I sort of thought, like most young people, I wasn't certain of what I wanted to do with my life. So I started out working in administration, actually, for an insurance and investment company, while I took night classes to get my bachelor's degree in business. My bachelor's degree, although focused on traditional accounting and managerial studies, also included at the time both commercial law and a major in clinical psychology. And I actually mentioned that because thinking back, and this is a question, in fact, asked by my alumni some years back, and they said, what was the most important and influential course you took while you're at university? And I will say, without a shadow of a doubt, it was my major in clinical psychology. This has been the single most valuable and useful course I have taken that has helped me in my career over the years. It's helped me navigate company cultures, interorganizational politics. It's helped me develop strategies for collaborating with people, and also for understanding and influencing others. And anybody who's sat in this chair at this level knows that those are critical skills, for being successful in this job. But I think most importantly, it really helped me understand myself, helped me understand my motivations, why I do things the way I do. And I think very topical for today is understanding your biases and how I react in certain situations. So, it allowed me to be somewhat introspective, and help me not externalize everything. I think you need a balance between, taking accountability for your actions and your thoughts, as well as realizing what you didn't have control over. So you have to have this balance of introspection and externalizing. And I think that can really help you navigate difficult situations. And that's certainly my experience for how psychology has helped me. It also really helped me develop some critical skills in what's referred today as emotional intelligence.
Yep.
And to be fair, I'm still developing in this area. So, go easy on me. And I think that this is going to be a lifelong journey for me. And I think for anybody really who's open to the notion of emotional intelligence, and that, hard technical skills are not only where it's at. So after I got my degree, I did what most young folk at the time were doing and decided to work in the UK, that's UK, England, on a 2-year work visa, and sort of travel in between temporary job assignments. This experience really broadened my personal perspectives at a relatively young age. And what I found out was that what I already found out from this experience was what I did not want to do with my life. And I knew I didn't want to be an accountant. I didn't want to work in finance. But since then, I've kind of learned that, well, there's no real escaping finance and accounting. It's sort of been my nemesis through my whole career. It's followed me around. So glad I did those courses in university. They've helped, but not an area I love. So while I was working in London, I worked for a major US bank, and I had my first introduction to IT while working on a management and systems development project for them. I'd always been keenly interested in technology. I'd taken some technology courses as part of my undergrad degree, and I tinkered a fair bit on my own, even dabbled in programming and systems development. But what I really discovered while working at the bank on this new systems initiative of theirs was that I really enjoyed the opportunity to improve the performance of business processes through the application of technology. And I realized that this is something that I wanted to take forward as a career. So I felt like I'd sort of found my calling in life, which sort of brought together my interests in business and business performance management, as well as my love for technology at the time. But at that stage, I don't think I could have dreamed about where this career would take me, both in a physical sense, but also on an intellectual and emotional development sense. I've certainly learned a huge amount since then. So when I returned home from my travels after 2 years, I decided I wanted to work in the area of IT management and started working for a consulting company called Coopers & Lybrand. 2 years later, while working for Coopers & Lybrand, I had my first introduction to an experience with mergers when Coopers & Lybrand merged with Price Waterhouse to form what is today Price Waterhouse Coopers, PwC. And so that was certainly interesting. Going through a merger of that sort of global scale was a massive learning experience for me, and something I've called upon many times in my career. It taught me a lot about navigating relationships. It taught me a lot about individuals and their emotions, as well as developing relationships both within your immediate office or business unit, within the company at large, and on a global scale, as well as outside of the company with clients and other folk. PwC provided me with opportunities to work with some major global companies. And I also gained experience in areas I had not considered possible when I joined them. I was fortunate to work with some of the most talented individuals on many interesting projects in South Africa and globally. I never stopped learning, and thinking back, it was about then that I returned, that I decided that when I returned from London, I would add a fourth major to my undergrad degree, and I went back to university and studied a major in information systems. And the way that course was taught at my university was super interesting. I haven't actually seen a course taught like that. And I'd love the opportunity to sit down with some Canadian universities and share how that course was developed and taught. We hire a lot of young folk into Cameco, both on internships. So these would be 12 or 18-month internships, as well as just summer students. And I'm always struck with how little they know about how IT actually functions in the context of a business. It's almost like information systems management and the role of information systems is not taught at a university. Certainly, it hasn't come across to me that it is. I think that's a gap and something we should be addressing as leaders across the tech sector in Canada. So also while at PwC, my wife and I decided that we would study together towards our MBAs. Yes, I'm one of those people, an MBA. And we completed our MBAs in 2 years while I was traveling and consulting, as well as starting a family at the same time. My wife was also working full-time for a USAID funded company at the same time. So life was crazy and it was busy. And it taught me a lot about myself. It taught me a lot about time management. And it also helped me prioritize what is truly important in life. And I think that has certainly carried with me throughout. Around the end of the period and while we're expecting our second child, I decided that I need to be closer to home. And just so happened that a door opened for me and I was offered a position at a local bank as CIO. To lead a transformation of the IT function. It's an opportunity was just too good to pass up. I was an ex-PwC partner who invited me in there, again, which shows, do a good job where you are and who knows what doors will open up. Yeah. So I accepted the role, and within 3 weeks of starting, I found myself in the midst of another merger, this time more as a target of an acquisition. It was another learning experience for me. I did get to complete my transformation strategy. About 80% of it was actually completed before I actually left. And was around about then that some new opportunities appeared on the horizon. And I decided to go out as an independent contractor. So back into the consulting field, this time as an independent, working on a number of contracts with public sector and government. I really feel for our colleagues who work in government and public sector, it is a special place to work. It is different from private enterprise. I think you need to have much higher emotional IQ than in any other part of the consulting game to work there. It is difficult. It can be slow and frustrating at times as well. So, heartfelt sympathies for folk working in government. I understand how difficult it can be to get things done on that side of the fence, but it is a great challenge to have as well. So my contractor work involved me acting as an adjudicator on IT bids and selecting competent vendors to work on key IT projects on behalf of local authorities. And this was specifically for projects that were funded by provincial and national government at the time. And it was another huge learning curve for me. I got my first introduction to large contract negotiating, also into some backyard shenanigans, I'll call it, attempts to influence the adjudicator, all those things. And I think that's where my family values of high integrity really stood me in good stead, because I think it's very easy to sometimes step on the wrong side of that line. So it was a great learning experience for me. We did some amazing work over the 5 years I did that. But around that time, things were deteriorating in South Africa, and my wife and I, we had 2 young boys. We decided that we would look to immigrate somewhere in the world. So we looked around, and Canada came up as an option. And we chose Canada because it was completely opposite to anything we had previously experienced. Not only climate-wise, but we thought, maybe more of a North American culture. But also we had traveled to Canada during our time in London, and we really liked the Canadian people. We liked, the family values. We like, everybody says Canadians are polite. we personally love that about Canadians, and it was a great experience for us. So we thought we'd fit in really, really well here. So I traded my surfboard for a snowboard, and off we went. So when I arrived in Canada, I rejoined PricewaterhouseCoopers in Calgary, Alberta, and it was like rejoining an old family. I felt very comfortable at PwC, back on the consulting side of the table. And through PwC in Calgary, I got to work with some excellent clients, met some amazing people, traveled the world on working on some interesting projects. And I certainly got to work on some very challenging projects that taught me a lot. Every client situation was an opportunity to learn something new or approach a familiar problem from a new perspective. And I think, that's another good learning opportunity, is that, there's never one way to solve a problem. There are multiple ways. And often the situation you find yourself in will dictate, which perspective you come at it from. So if anybody's wondering if it's worth working for a significant consulting practice, I'd highly recommend it. I think I did a book review for an author out of the US some time ago. We had been chatting backwards and forth, and I'd contributed a little bit to his research. And he said, what is the one thing that you would wish your staff would do? And I said, I wish that they could spend 2 years in a consulting practice. I think your rate of learning, the skills you learn, both hard skills and soft skills, consulting will carry you through your business career and will help you. It doesn't matter which side of the table you end up sitting, it will help you massively. And, truly some of the talented people you work with in those consulting companies is truly amazing. But you have to be willing to be challenged. You have to be willing to work hard. You have to be willing to put yourself out there, take some personal risks, and be a self-starter. If you're not the kind of person who believes in continuous learning and continuous self-development, then I would probably not recommend that as a career. But certainly is something there. So my path with PwC led me to Cameco. I worked for a subsidiary of Cameco's at the time, got to know the executive Cameco fairly well. Was a very interesting project, 18 months that saw me travel around the world. So when the time came for them to look for a new head of IT, and I'd previously consulted to Cameco for a short sort of 8-month stint in a director level position for them, to second it in to help out while they found someone to fill that position. So when they put the call into me, I had an option of going to an oil and gas company at the same time. And my choice in front of me at that time was either participate in somebody else's IT transformation at an oil and gas company in Calgary, or lead my own transformation within Cameco. Being the kind of person I am, for me, it was a no-brainer. Yes, it did mean moving to Saskatchewan, where it's damn cold in winter. But I would say that was the right move. And although it felt like the harder path, it has certainly been and proven to be the best path that I think I could have taken for my career. This is a fantastic company to work with. The people here are awesome. We have an amazing executive, and I learn something new from everybody in the company every day. And it doesn't matter who they are, whether they run down there on the shop floor or on the top floor. Every day I learn something new from someone. Gain a new perspective, understand something new. It's an amazing area to learn. And of course, I've learned so much about the uranium industry. And I went from, I'd say, a nuclear neutral to a hardcore nuclear believer. I really believe that this is the only short-term way we have to meet our global climate challenge today. And I think Cameco is really in the middle of it here. And we have an amazing story to tell around that.
So Mark, thank you. This is such a wonderful story. If I was to sort of extract key things I've learned from you about your story and your success, first, you are clearly a lifelong learner with passion and curiosity. So I think that's sort of number one. I loved your clinical psychology comments. As a matter of fact, you may or may not be surprised. I've now interviewed dozens and dozens of top tier Canadian tech executives. Minority are actually technologists. We've got lawyers, we've got engineers, teachers, people who happen to land in and discover this interest mid-career oftentimes. But I've never had someone who is a clinical psychologist. And when you started talking about that, I was like, how useful skill, knowledge for the actual job, which then you said, networking people, understanding unconscious bias, self-reflection, balance, and everything you've got from the. So I would say the second thing is that personality, emotional intelligence, that is a second sort of domain of strength. And third is you have courage to actually try things out, and that international experience and networking with people. I think so. Those are the three things that I've extracted as kind of check, check, check. Fair?
Absolutely fair. And I think just sharing with one of my sons who's just starting out in his career, and I think there's so much pressure on young people today to reach for that pinnacle of success right away. And I said, just relax. Start out in one area. Don't think that this is your end journey or your the end of your career. You're going to develop. You may completely change. Yeah. Just be open to new ideas and opportunities. And who knows where it'll take you.
When we hear that over and over from people that on the interview, like, don't pigeonhole yourself, be open to ideas, take advantage, try things out. That's, I think, an excellent advice for those in the audience who are contemplating career change or trying something different or new. So now you are at Cameco. I'd love to ask if you could maybe share some of the interesting things. What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? You mentioned transformation. What are you working on that you think this audience would welcome to learn more about?
Yeah, like I said, interesting company, but what a lot of people don't know is that for the past 11 years, Cameco has endured an extremely challenging operating environment and commodity market that has put the company under enormous cost pressures. So cost takeout and efficiency has been a top focus for us, and we've had to make some very aggressive cost reduction choices over the year. If you want to know how to identify and reduce IT costs, we have the playbook, and it's detailed. We've really done it. We've achieved some amazing successes up until 2020. We had managed to cut IT costs by 48%, reduced our staff headcount, including contractors, by over 30%. We had reduced our IT costs as a percentage of revenue from around 3% to about 0.7% at our lowest cost. And I think this is a similar story across all of the business units here at Cameco. Of course, we knew at the time that we're very intentionally harming our investment in technology because we needed to get those cost takeout opportunities embedded in. And we knew that it couldn't be sustained indefinitely. So we've been talking for a number of years about tech debt, right, and the growing tech debt. And the real irony about this sort of focus on cost reduction, it actually helped us position very, very well for a pandemic. And you might be saying, well, how do you make that connection, Mark? I mean, that's crazy, right? Well, we had to completely rethink the way we run infrastructure in the company. And so we moved away from our own data centers. We moved into colo facilities. And we also knew we had to enable our people to work from anywhere at any time. And so back in 2016, we had full remote work capabilities already implemented in the company. And we had plans to do the upgrades. Also, the sort of focus on cost reduction allowed us to skip a whole middle generation of technology. So now we're leaping forward, taking step changes into the future. And we always knew we were going to reinvest in technology. We always knew we were going to have to ramp up spending. We were really just waiting for the right time and really hoping that the time to invest in technology would coincide with the market up ramp. And I don't think we could have timed it any better. I mean, on reflection, it would have been nice if we could have started our digital transformation a year earlier than we did, certainly considering the pandemic. But I think we have very successfully implemented a large number of very large scale technology changes across the company right at the start of the pandemic and all the way through the pandemic. And we're not done. We're still on a very big kick, digital transformation here at Cameco. And we look at digital transformation through a lens of three kind of levels. And I really think you've got to attack all three levels at the same time. So at the most basic level, is, what we call digitization, and that's taking all your paper forms, all your manual processes, converting them into digital equivalents. Then we have a sort of a middle layer, which is focused on business process and business optimization, which we call digitalization. And that's looking at improving processes. So you need to bring that lean lens, and we have. We've invested a lot of money in the company, including in IT, in understanding lean and lean thinking, and we apply it broadly in the company. Today, still, my IT groups, the various groups inside of BTS or our IT group, we still do daily stand-ups, which is something we learned from lean. We still use a Kanban board to help control our work, which is something we learned from lean. And we had created this concept of lean for IT. So we've taken lean concepts and applied them to IT that has helped us move down a path of agile and DevOps as well. So again, we're never standing still on that side. So the third sort of level that we look at in terms of this is the full-on what we call digital transformation. And what we're looking for from digital transformation, it may not be new sources of revenue, because, well, let's face it, in the nuclear industry, there are fairly limited new sources of revenue or new ways to generate revenue. But certainly we are interested in how technology can give us a step change in our business performance, whether it is in how we go about mining and extracting uranium, how we go about milling it, how we go about refining and producing it, or even how we go about marketing it on that side. And of course, there's the host of innovations you can bring in terms of your corporate G&E areas and how you can actually drive transformation on those sides there as well. So, we sort of crafted 6 digital themes, which we have carefully aligned to our corporate strategy. And our corporate strategy is one where, amongst other things, we're looking for operational flexibility. So we know that to survive into the future, you're going to have to be able to scale your organization up and scale it back down. And so when you're scaling up, you certainly don't want to add costs at a 1-to-1 ratio. So we're looking for that ratio, maybe 5-to-1 or 10-to-1, where we can scale up business activity, but costs only scale at 1/10 of what they did previously. And so that's factored into our whole digital transformation strategy. It's built into our business plans and what we're trying to achieve here in the company. I can't give you the exact numbers because obviously that stuff is confidential inside of the company. But it's something we're very, very focused on from that point of view.
This is fascinating. Yeah. So, sorry, go ahead.
Carry on.
I was going to say that it sounds like that this market pressure that you mentioned from 10 years ago really was that fulcrum moment that it was a crisis, and you took advantage of that crisis to not just lean the operations, but to actually rethink what you do and how you do everything at the core, and leapfrog into the future. So, the old saying, don't waste a good crisis, right?
Oh, no, absolutely. And I think that's exactly what we've done. And it's the core part of our digital transformation. We're still going through it right now. We're saying we don't want to go through what we went through in the last 11 years. We don't want to, create job insecurity. We want our people who work for us to feel like they have a long-term home with us. And so you can only do that if you really focus on technology as an enabler for that strategy, right? So you have to ruthlessly focus on automation and all levels. I'm not just talking about physical automation. Of course, we're investing in robotics. We want to play around with Boston Dynamics, dog called Spot. We've got some great use cases for it from a safety point of view. We want to innovate in that area, but don't forget about software automation. Don't forget about automating your business processes. Don't forget about, moving up that scale to almost, that AI field where you can start to offload some basic decisions to automated systems along the way. You can really create scale in your organization if you do that. But alongside that, you kind of also have to focus on your culture. And that's something we realized very early on. So when we started this digital transformation journey and we sat down as a leadership team across the whole company, we all agreed that boy, we're going to touch people in a big way through this transformation.
Yeah.
We better pay attention to culture. We need to pivot from, head down, follow the process kind of culture to, we want to have a dual culture where we're focused on innovation. We want people to bring ideas forward. We want people to feel comfortable trying out new things, even failing, so we can learn from it. Our only caveat is we will not put the environment or people at risk. So we're very careful around anything that touches those areas or put risk into those areas. But for the rest of it, it's fair game. Failure is an option at Cameco. And I think too often people say failure is not an option. And I go, well, you're never going to learn. You're never going to progress if you don't fail, if you don't try different things. So for us, that's a really, really key part of what we do.
Excellent.
And so we're investing in our culture. We're pivoting our culture. A really key part of that, which dovetails into our whole ESG approach, is inclusion and diversity. And I think this company has made some amazing strides over the last 2 years in inclusion and diversity. And when we think about that, we think about it very broadly. We don't only think about it in terms of a gender point of view. We think about it in terms of visible minorities, in terms of First Nations, in terms of everybody. I don't think any company can afford to ignore half the talent that's out there, or more than half the talent that's out there. We've got immigrants coming to Canada who are very skilled and very knowledgeable. I really think we should be embracing those people, giving them opportunities. That's how we're going to fill the skills gap that we have, which I see as one of our biggest challenges today, is filling that skill gap in the company. And we have a number of approaches for trying to deal with that, but it's hard, right? Changing people, changing culture is hard. We have to move through what we call the valley of despair. And we have to go from doing digital to being digital. And that's one of the sort of key mantras you'll hear around here is transforming people from doing digital, so using technology, to being digital, where technology is a natural part of how we work on a daily basis.
Yeah. That's fantastic. So thank you very much for sharing all this. We did actually get a question on your ESG front, specifically I'm going to assume around, you mentioned, like, we're not going to compromise environment, we're not going to compromise safety. Everything else is up for innovation and risk taking. So are you able to comment, like, given of course you're a mining company, anything that, like, and perhaps maybe from your lens as a CIO, what role do you see a technology leader assuming taking driving in the context of ESG agenda?
Thanks, Dalibor. I think that's a great question. I think there is the obvious things which IT should be doing, which is, connecting data, driving analytics, helping drive the implementation, especially in mining and manufacturing, the use of IoT systems to get better data, to understand energy usage, to do all those things. So I think, across all levels, there is this whole support IT should be providing the organization around analytics, advanced analytics, AI, and that all factors into that. But I think, generally in terms of 3 areas specifically, so when I think about environment and sustainability, there are things we should be focusing on in IT. So we should be looking at circularity and recyclability of technology, and responsible disposal of technology. Mm-hmm. How are we thinking about that? Are we asking the manufacturers of this equipment the right questions? Are we bringing this to the top of their agenda? In terms of tier 2 and tier 3 emissions, what are they doing to be greener, to be more sustainable in terms of manufacturing the equipment that we need to use to advance our businesses? Let's face it, to get to emission zero, I think we're going to have to, quadruple, 100 times X our use of technology to get there. I don't think we can get there in a very manual way. The second part, I think, in terms of environmental and sustainability, is looking at our own IT tier 2 emissions. So if you're, in our case, we don't run our own data centers. At least if we do, they're more data closets. But you've got to think about your energy usage. There is and everybody talks about, blockchain and cryptocurrencies, and their energy usage has been not green because of the sheer amount of power that those processors use. Well, we use similar amounts of power in our data centers. So if you're running a data center, what are you doing to source sustainable renewable sources of energy to power your data centers. I think that's something key you can contribute to your company's ESG efforts. Where you're using cloud computing, are you having conversations with your cloud providers on how they source sustainable energy? We are. We're having conversations with some of our key cloud partners on where they're getting their energy from, and we're going to start asking for reporting on that. Yeah. We have a role in terms of assisting supply chain and gathering data on tier 2 and tier 3 emissions as well, yeah. If you want to get to that point. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for IT to help, to play a major role in that. And I think we're going to be a key partner at the table going forward for that. Yep. On the social side, I think developing skills, creating opportunities for inclusion, and ensuring that there is an opportunity for participation in the digital workplace is really, really key. So from an IT perspective, we support diversity and inclusion. We have very concrete plans in the way we hire and the way we promote internally. Mm-hmm. We also want to hire more from the communities we work in. But that's a bit of a dual-edged sword, because often some of these communities are remote. And so we first need to upskill them. And so we've invested in programs that actually we go out into the communities, and through some of our key technology partners with some local Saskatoon companies, we're actually developing training for First Nations, for our northern communities, for the communities we're working in, so that they will be able to participate in our digital transformation, so that they will be skilled and be able to come and work at Cameco and occupy those positions and jobs. You know, one of the amazing things we've learned about remote work through the pandemic is that I don't need to source all my employees from Saskatoon or from, you know, large cities. I can, in fact, if someone has the aptitude and the ability, I can source them from wherever they have connectivity, including northern Saskatchewan. And we've historically never sourced our people from those areas. So we're looking forward to developing people so they can start to fulfill even those tech roles remotely without them having to travel and relocate. So they don't have to leave their communities to participate in digital transformation or to participate in the digital economy. We can certainly enable it from where they are, and we're hoping that works out well for us. Yeah, in terms of governance, cybersecurity and those things.
Yeah, so wonderful. I mean, the situation that we found ourselves in through COVID has clearly opened up a whole new set of opportunities. I love hearing how you are taking, advantage for both value on both sides. This is really, really good. Excellent. So Mark, obviously you had a long and a successful career, starting, as you mentioned, exploring accounting and finance, and then exposure to your technology through your first work in bank while you were in the UK and so forth, as a technology leader too, and consultant. By the way, that was not a paid plug for consulting. So thanks for that. I happen to agree with you 100%. What I'm interested to know is your view on the evolution of the role of a technology leader, CIO. How, like, any comments on how you've seen the role change, and where do you think the role itself is heading?
It's another great question, and I think for those of us who are in leadership positions, we'd like to see this transformation happen quicker than it is, but it has changed. So back in the day when I started, IT was very much back office, hopefully heard but not seen. The only time you're really interested in talking to somebody in IT was when things went wrong. The rest of the time it was like a light switch. As long as when I hit the button everything worked, it was great. But I think that's changing, right? So I'm seeing, we have to be much more involved in leading a lot of the thoughts and the thought processes around how you transform a company. We have to lead idea generation on where the opportunities lie in companies. IT is in one of the very unique positions in the company, along with maybe one or two other service organizations in most companies, where we truly see across the full company. We don't see a narrow slice because we provide services across the entire company. We can pick out all the inefficiencies along the way, and we really should be, identifying those, not being quiet. Don't sit down and be quiet about it. Create initiatives, drive those initiatives. So one of the things we've done inside our company is we're driving the whole analytics portfolio. We didn't start this now when it was a topical thing. We've been driving analytics and AI for the past 5 years in IT. We just struggled to get traction because the business understanding wasn't there. But what we've seen in the last 2 years is this massive change in the business areas, and we've been very well positioned to help them immediately. And so we've seen the adoption of analytics in our company. I would still say we're still on the first 2.5 tiers of that journey in terms of maturity, but we're fast gaining ground on that side. So, IT has to take, and people in leadership have to take a more forceful role in identifying and leading change and transformation in the company.
I love it. I love it. So if I could summarize what I heard you say, historically, IT audit taker, IT as a, don't call me if everything is working, just there to provide support, and audit taker. And then there was a phase where we were kind of the business partners, understanding the business, but still sort of following the business direction. But what you're saying is now the role expectation ought to be that IT leader is there having a bird's eye view and coming up and leading certain things ahead of the business, showing the way, charting the path.
Yeah,
sort of that this is excellent. Actually, I have a term for that. We call them kinetic leaders. The ones who actually have the momentum and kinetic energy to move it forward. Our own CIO, for those who remember that interview, she said exactly that. Like, of course, you have to be the business partner, but the true value is when you come up with ideas that will move the business forward, and they then think of it and agree. So this was excellent. We have a couple of questions coming up from the audience. I'm just going to maybe pick a couple. There was an interesting question about the mine of the future. I'm not sure to what degree you can comment on those, but I would love to get your thoughts on if to what degree do you think this, to what degree can you share about what's happening technology-wise, not IT, but the capital TT in that context?
I'll share broadly. I can't share details and specific projects, obviously. So yes, very interesting. So we think about it in sort of 2 event horizons, if you will, 3 if you really want to stretch it. So we realized that in mining, because we're capital intensive, there's a huge investment in existing equipment, which may be dumb, right? Some of the stuff has been around for 20 years, 30 years, in instances 40 years. And doing a rip and replace is capital intensive. So what we've done is we've created a staging period, what we've called the mine and the mill of tomorrow. And that's aimed at, sort of changes we can make incrementally while we understand our asset strategies and what we might want to replace and the business value around it. That leads us down the path to some, let's call them more audacious goals around the mine and mill of the future, right? So, in that context, we're looking at getting people out of harm's way. We're looking at improving our environmental performance, our safety performance. We have Mission Zero on the safety side. Technology can play a big thing. And it can be simple things like, let's say, doing mine shaft inspections, using drones to do mine shaft inspections instead of putting people down that in our mills. If we needed to often do tank inspections, or exploring drones and other robotic devices that can do that. Being able to take constant measures so we can get ahead of failures, so we can get better at predictive analytics. We're looking at things like crawler bots that can crawl along piping and take piping measurement, thickness measurements as we go. Again, this is all underpinned by a very strong IT backbone, communication backbone, data backbone that we're busy building now. And that takes time to build that. We have to go from, silos of data to a much more integrated data set. And we're working with some key technology partners on getting there, but just understand it's not something you just turn on no matter what anybody tells you. It's a journey, and it's as much about a people change as it is about, a technology change. So yeah, we're looking at all those things on how do we drive those efficiencies? How do we mechanize our operations? Uranium mining is interesting because it's more like boutique mining. The deposits are very small and close together. Our mining footprints are very, very small. And so it's not like, say, the potash mines or what you see out in Sudbury, which are very deep, very large mines stretching, 10, 20 kilometers underground, maybe even further. In the case of the potash mines, our mines are very tight. So often it's difficult to make a business case for some of this technology, but we're trying and we're investing where we need to. We don't take a cost-only approach. We look at this in terms as well, and does it help our environmental performance? Does it help our safety performance as well? And so we will make strategic investments where it can help those things.
Mark, this was fantastic. I want to be respectful of your time. We are now at time, 45 minutes is what we planned. But I know I could listen to you for the next 3 hours and it'll be interesting. I want to really thank you very much for this. Remind the audience members that next week on the 9th of March, I'll be joined by Rex Lee, who is the Vice President and CIO of Canadian Tire, an iconic Canadian brand. And they've just actually posted the results, and it's been, I think, the best results ever. And he's leading that digital transformation. So it'll be a fascinating conversation as well. Just like Mark, this conversation was exceptionally interesting, informative, fascinating. I learned a lot. I want to thank you very much for your time. I want to thank you on behalf of all the audience members, and I very much look forward to staying connected, Mark.
Yep. Thanks, Dalibor. Very much appreciated. And thank you everyone out there for your time.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.